Good evening. I'm Claremont Featherstone inviting you to Security Focus. This evening, before I go into regular programming, I would like to touch briefly on a matter that was mentioned in the newspaper only a few days ago. And it had to do with a matter that Attorney Dexter Todd is currently engaged in. I remembered he had something to say about the quality of police investigations, and I want to zero in on that at this point. I have always found it strange whenever I encounter police officers. I would encounter police investigators from time to time, and many are proud to say, well, we were in the Army intelligence or military police for 15 years. We were in CID for another 15 years. So we have quite a lot of investigative and policing experience. And when I look at them, I would see very clearly that there are some basic things that they have not learned or that they continue to overlook. Recall once seeing an investigator of a private security company who claimed to have been both a police and a military investigator, trying to get some information in a school compound. And I said to him, I had control of the school security, and I said to him, you cannot question the school children. You cannot question the people in the school canteen. You should go to the headmistress or the deputy, or at least speak to a senior master or mistress, and they would be in a good position to assist you. And we spoke back and forth, and I could not convince him to do the right thing. And eventually he became heated. And I said to him, I says, look, this is a school compound, and these are wards of the state, and the ministry and the school is acting in loco parentis, in place of the parents of these students. And he quickly said to me, but yes, that is true, but these girls are 16 and 17, and these are big girls, and they have the man and the boys got the woman. And so I says, but nonetheless, they're still wards of the state, and if they get themselves into trouble, the ministry's welfare department, you will have to deal with them, irrespective. I became annoyed with him, and he was bent on doing the thing the wrong way, and I chased him out of the compound and notified the security company that he was working with. And they suspended him. So the viewer would want to know perhaps why. There are some basic principles in law enforcement or in investigation. And whenever I encounter, whenever I teach the field, I always test my investigators on those 4 basic principles. And if you don't know them as a law enforcement official, you will be constrained to learn them the hard way, as was the case with former Commissioner of Police Winston Felix and a contingent of police officers who turned up at the University of Ghana when they had a protest action, went on to the university only to be told by the registrar that they are not invited, leave these premises. And I was told this by the former commissioner himself. So this is how it goes. As a police officer, you should know 4 basic things. You should understand the workings of the in loco parentis doctrine, which comes from the Latin. And it simply means the person or individuals acting in place of a parent. So the daycare is acting in loco parentis. The primary school teachers and administration is acting in loco parentis, and so is the municipal daycare centers and any place where you keep children during the day or any period of time, such as the orphanages and so forth, they too are acting in loco parentis. And so you have to know what you can do in an entity or in a place that children are kept for a period of time, such as police officers engage in schoolboys, schoolgirls, engage in schools, and the like. Then there is the parents' parentis doctrine, which has to do with the national policy power of the state. So we're looking at how that works. There was a matter some years ago where a gentleman who was attached to Georgetown Hospital as a guard had a relationship with a mental patient, and I think the patient was impregnated, and the story got a lot uglier. And in the end, he became enmeshed with the law, and I think he was sentenced to 2 years or what have you, because that piece of law, that ancient doctrine, empowered the state to act on behalf of the person. The state felt that the person could not deal with certain issues as a full-fledged adult, and the state felt, therefore, you were put there to watch over that person's security and the security of the caregiver, and they felt that you advantaged the person, parentis patriae doctrine, and he was sentenced. And so investigators should understand some of these principles of how the law operate and some of the things that influences the law. Then there are two other basic principles that they should know. We have what's called the principle of expansile significance. And this has to do with, you stop a vehicle, you see a man driving down the road without shirt, and he looks as if he's under the influence initially. You stop him. You take all precautions, and the man is not wearing a shirt, not wearing a shoe, violated some minor offenses so far, statutes, no shirt, no shoe. But now the principle of expansile significance tells you that you should carry the investigation to its logical conclusion. And so what you decide to do is very cautiously, you ask him for his license and the insurance and so forth. You discover that the license are out of order, something is not in his name, you realize that the car is a stolen car. For all you know, you probably retrieve drugs in the glove compartment. Then you find 2 guns, whether they are machine guns, sidearm. You find those in the trunk. And you would have applied the principles of expansive significance and took the investigation to its logical conclusion. The fourth I want to discuss briefly is the Lowcut exchange principle. And I say to officers, I says, you know, when you go into a place as a security officer or a police officer, or you go into a place as anybody, whether you know it or believe it or not, you take something with you, whether it is a cold, a flu, a virus, hair fibers, fibers off of your clothing, skin cells that drop off. You take things with you wherever you go. There is an exchange of sort. And when you leave there, you leave with things unintended. And so in forensic, when we are trying to ascertain what might have gone wrong, you're looking for tire marks, you're looking for extraneous fibers from clothing, skin cells, and other property extraneous or foreign to the immediate vicinity. And when I raise this conversation with many of the people who have been in the police force and in the army for 15 and 20 years, they never know what I'm talking about. And when I teach investigators and I question them on those 4 basic principles, they never know, irrespective of where they came from and how long they were in service, never seem to know. And when we go into intelligence, they always seem to have a myopic view of intelligence. I'll give you my take on this myopic view. I came across a young woman who, by her utterances and behavior, convinced me that she knew that the Bank of Baroda was planning a sellout. She knew that. She had certain information 3-4 months ago to that effect. But here we are hearing now that the government of Guyana, the Bank of Guyana, is saying that that move caught them off guard. That move caught them by surprise. And I locate that very scenario within the context of poor intelligence gathering in our country. When we come back, I shall deal some more with some important issues to our local environment. Please stay tuned. Security Focus is brought to you by Regium International, Northwest Investment Inc., Intelligard Specialist Security Services, and the Institute of Security and Public Safety. Welcome back. In my last episode, I spoke briefly about having seen a number of dogs, stray dogs, feeding in specific locales around the city. And I was privileged over the weekend to catch up with a nice lady who is involved in this practice. And I did have a little discussion with her, and I knew that she was somewhat annoyed, not abusive in any way, but as it were, kind of hot-mouthish. And she was annoyed that I was raising some pertinent issues with her. For the authorities' sake, allow me to briefly touch on this matter. So what is taking place is we have quite a few stray dogs in Georgetown and its environs. We have a couple of persons who for now are feeding these dogs. These people might have started off feeding these dogs with their own money, but pretty soon they are going to receive monies from far and wide from animal welfare or animal rights agencies. And these agencies, who always have a hidden agenda, will then come to Guyana and incorporate and look for business opportunities or whatever it is that they want to do under the guise of animal welfare and animal rights. When you hear the term animal welfare and animal rights, you're looking at 2 extreme philosophies that our local police, either the municipal police or the national police, our magistrates, judges, and prosecutors are not trained to deal with. And I know that much. Many of these people then are going to recruit over time persons or people with political agenda will try to lend support to these groups. And they're going to feed dogs all over the city, feed dogs in front of your house, feed dogs in front of any building, and as it is now, these dogs are being drawn to areas that dogs were not in previously. And they dwell on the street, they don't know where to go, and they jump fences, go into people's yards, bite people, get bitten by people's animals, have a lot of noise in the neighborhood, and so forth. Only recently, there was a situation where about 4 of them were drawn to Carmichael Street because the people came there and fed them almost every day. But then one went across the street in front of the Tolman Reed Rehabilitation Center and defecated. And then when you look at what passed out, you saw practically a tapeworm nest. Forgetting, of course, that what you have behind is a children's hospital or a rehabilitative center for young people with all sorts of problems. Then you have these dogs carrying all sorts of conditions. When you go and you start feeding stray dogs, you create an explosion in the population because the dog is a higher vertebrate and the carrying capacity of the environment is set at a particular level. The population density of higher vertebrates are always close to the carrying capacity, say 10–15% give or take, so that we already have a lot of dogs owned and not so well owned moving in and around our city. When you give them food and you make it possible that other dogs can meet reproductive maturity, then you have an explosion in the population. But that's not my problem. My problem is when these people leave the food for the dogs to eat, the dogs eat and the dogs move on and the water is left. And then the birds come and drink the water and eat the food. And then the raccoons come and the rats come. And then the next thing you find out, you have hepatitis and a whole host of zoonosis all over the place. And some malicious person gets on the internet and says, well, guess what? You are going to Guyana for a holiday. You didn't hear what's going on there? Stray dogs all over the place. Stray cats all over the place. There is hepatitis. There is toxoplasmosis. There is rabies in Guyana. And the entire tourism industry is thrown in a tailspin. It is from this angle that I'm seeing what is going on. But I believe this is a wake-up call for the authorities, because had they been paying some sort of attention to animal control, particularly dog control, we would not have been in this situation. So I'm asking the authorities, and I'm talking to whether it is health, Ministry of Agriculture, the municipality, and the other relevant government agencies to watch closely at the economic fallout of a growing stray dog population. There are some other things that I would want to touch on, and one has to do with a racket that we're having in Guyana at the moment, the house selling racket. You know, ever so often I encounter a friend who would have gotten ripped off while attempting to buy a property from somebody. So there are a number of persons in Guyana who look at properties, do a background investigation on them, and then they move in for the kill, obtain false documentation, and they are ready to sell this house with this false documentation to some person or group of persons. And sometimes when the people turn up to look for the property, they take them to the property and they take you to places where you see a decent looking family, a concocted family as it were. So you see two looking grandchildren, they look like grandchildren and they look genuine, and you see a grandmother looking person and a grandfather looking person and what appears to be an extended family, all concocted for this venture. And you hand over large sums of money, and the people takes the document to the court, and there are officers in the court who knowingly pass these documents, knowingly pass these documents. And when the officers of the court finds that the matter is becoming hot, the officers tell them that this thing cannot be passed for this amount of money because questions will be asked, and you got to do better than this. They leave, go to some place, tell somebody, look, this matter cannot be passed for $900,000, and we got to do better than that. And they come back with $1.5 million and by 1 o'clock, those documents are passed, and you have just lost your property. If for nothing else, when APNU came into power, about 12 or 15 persons who have lost properties in that manner previously got back those properties. About 7 of them in the South Rhymeville, Tuckville, Meadowbrook area alone. And so even now, it is still going on, and I implore you to be very careful when you're going into transactions for the sale of properties, because many of the people who are buying these properties are very decent looking people sitting on the veranda, and from the time they buy this property for $12 million, 2-3 weeks from now, they put it on the market and they sell it for $5-10 million more, and nobody can go to them. I had owned the property. I used to own it. I don't own it anymore. And that makes for a very difficult kind of case to trace. And so you need to ensure that you factor all of these things in. There is another matter that I quickly want to touch on, and it has to do with caregivers. You know, when foreign caregivers, foreigners come to our country, many of them will be looking for a job, and anything they can get, they will take. And many of them leave the Philippines and some specific countries with caregiving in their minds because they can get a place to stay, and eventually their husbands or boyfriends could join them, other relatives can join them, and the like. But you need to be very careful, because even here in Guyana, and I've known lots of cases in Trinidad, where persons have had caregivers come into their lives, into their property, and the next thing you find out, the caregiver became emotionally attached, or to put it another way, the caregiver managed the emotion of the patient, your grandfather, your uncle, to the extent where the caregiver, for purposes of economic gain, got involved with the person or allowed the person to believe that that is what actually happened. And before you know it, the person dies, and the next thing you know, 3, 4, 5 properties are left for the caregiver, who's essentially an economic migrant. And so we have to be very, very careful with this sort of behavior. I've known of lots of people in Canada and the US, parts of the Caribbean, who have lost large estates to Filipino women. I see lots of them coming here. Filipino women, Filipino men, and from the time they arrive, they want to get into the caregiving field. So those of us who are going to become preoccupied and busy when the oil starts to produce, be mindful of who you take to care for your relatives, because you might very well find out that they are doing a lot more than providing basic day-to-day care. When we come back, I will conclude with a few important points. Please stay tuned. Security Focus is brought to you by Regium International, Northwest Investment Inc., IntelliGuard Specialist Security Services, and the Institute of Security and Public Safety. Thanks for remaining with us. Several years ago, I conducted an interview for the Guyana Review magazine and had occasion to interview the then director of the Food and Drug Administration. And I remember one of the things she said to me. She said, we in Guyana are having a problem with the policing of things that comes into Guyana, imports, whether it is drugs, whether it is food, durable, non-durable items, and so forth. And recently, I heard about pharmaceuticals coming from certain countries not doing what they were supposed to do. I saw shoes that opened immediately after you came out of the store, clothespins that could not be used for more than once or twice, hats that you had passed through, and these things were coming through customs, and the customs are allowing them to come through, and they are receiving their duty and so. And I believe it is time for us to revisit that very situation, because during that very era, when I, perhaps 23, somewhere there, or 4, when I interviewed then President Barrett Jagdeo, he did say and admitted that he knew there was a problem with expired goods, large quantities of expired goods, food, and the like coming through, coming into our country. Recently, I was able to see chocolate biscuits and chocolates being given to children and sold to children in the street with maggots in it. And I've seen chocolate products come out of containers with maggots. I've seen overseas imported chicken and imported meat coming out of freezers. And when you cut the chicken to cook it, the chicken neck and the giblets and the liver will be inside, and you will notice that maggots would have taken over those blood-soaked organs, and that would have occurred before the cold storage would have properly built up the temperature. And so we have all of these problems in Guyana now. If you look outside of the Stabroek and the border market, you see people selling dairy products, cheese and chicken in the sun. And we need to be careful, because all of those translate to sicknesses and diseases. So I would like the authorities to revisit this whole notion of poorly policed food and pharmaceuticals being offered for sale and being brought into the country. As always, I've enjoyed being with you this evening. I am Claremont Featherstone, bidding you an enjoyable rest of the evening. Thanks for watching.